There are an awful lot of things that can eat up your time when you're on a set. And while this doesn't seem like it would be a big deal because most people assume that they're going to be spending at least 10 hours a day shooting, it can be a problem when you're on a very tight budget. Basically, the longer you spend dealing with these time eaters, the more shooting days you're probably going to end up needing. And that can seriously do some damage to your budget. Airplanes. If you are shooting with audio, you know all about airplanes. There are actually two ways that airplanes can be a problem. The first is that they can show up in shots where they really don't need to be. For example, you're shooting your epic medieval battle and all of a sudden an airplane comes into view. Now, you might be tempted to say, oh, it's okay, we'll fix it in post, which, by the way, is the worst mantra any film set should ever have. Just ask an editor. The fact is, airplanes can show up and completely ruin a shot very easily. And of course, the problem that people are more familiar with are the loud and distinctive noises that airplanes can make. My suggestion is to try to stay away from airports as much as possible, and this includes the privately owned airports for people who keep private planes that they own for leisure. Also, check flight paths. This is going to tell you where things are going to be the noisiest. If you are in a flight path that's coming to or from a runway, you're going to be dealing with loud noises from airplanes about every 10-15 minutes. Animals. Our furry and fluffy friends can be a big problem on a film set. I know, people wonder, how can animals possibly be a heck of a time eater? Well, there are several reasons why this is true. First of all, unlike humans, animals can't really be put on a schedule when it comes to their needs. If they have to itch, they're going to itch. They don't care if it makes their collar jingle. They gotta go potty, they're going to tell you about it. And they're not going to tell you about it politely in a whisper. Another problem with having people who are bringing the animals on the sets is that you will often get people on your cast or crew who just have to come up and say hi to them. And of course, that's going to eat up some time when you've got a small crowd around the cute little puppy that's starring in one scene, and you're trying to get everybody on set ready to film it. And then, of course, there's also the danger of animals, particularly when it comes to any animals that are used for any type of stunts. Horses come readily to mind here. Even experienced riders will tell you that there are some times where a horse will spook for no real apparent reason, and a rider could get thrown, or somebody could get stepped on or kicked. A lot can go wrong with animals, so you're going to be putting safety precautions in order, which is also going to eat up some of your time. And there's also the idea that sometimes these animals just do not want to perform, no matter how many treats you try to bribe them with. Children. Need I really say more? Well, I guess I will say more about this, because there are some things that people don't think about. Now, the obvious ones are going to be infants. Babies are messy. They're really messy. They really don't like taking direction either, so they will whine, cry, gurgle, spit up, poop, do whatever, and they're not going to ask for anybody's permission or ask you when it's time to do it or the correct time to do it, and you could be in the middle of the perfect shot and then all of a sudden have to stop everything because the baby needs changing. Now, while teenagers tend to behave themselves, children under the age of 10 can be a bit of a hassle as well. They get bored easily, and we all know that filmmaking is an awful lot of hurry up and wait. So they will make their own fun. You might have one more scene to shoot before you need the kids. The kids are there waiting, all dressed up in costume and ready to go. Scene's taking a little longer than they'd like, which means the average time of a scene. And they're going to come up with ways to amuse themselves. If you're really lucky, they'll do so without getting their costumes messed up. People who are late to call time. We've all had this happen to us at one time or another. Trust me, it is going to happen. At some point, you're going to be all impressed about how everybody's always showing up for the call times, and then one day, it's not going to happen. If it's a cast member, sometimes you can work around it. You might be able to find another scene where actors who are already there can change costumes real quick and do that particular scene while you're waiting for the missing actor. Or you might be able to spend the time doing some rehearsing or going over lines or talking to your actors about more difficult scenes that are later on in the schedule. You can generally find things to do with actors while you're waiting on a latecomer. Now, when it comes to crew members, it could be a different story. If it's somebody like a production assistant or maybe a minor crew player, a few minutes late isn't going to be a big deal. Even a half hour or an hour late is not going to be a big deal. But if it's somebody who's kind of essential in order to get things going, like, oh, I don't know, the cameraman, then you're running into some problems. If your crew person is way too late, you may end up just scrapping the whole day, especially if you have only limited amount of sunlight to go and you're shooting all exteriors that day. There's really no good solution to make sure that everybody arrives on time. What I generally do is I set my call time earlier than when I actually need them. For example, if I need them at a 3 o'clock call time, I will tell them I need them there at 2:30. That usually catches all the few minute strays. Actors who aren't off script. In case you aren't aware of the lingo, somebody who isn't off script means that they have not memorized their lines for a particular scene. While new actors might think that film is going to be so much easier because unlike stage you don't have to memorize the entire play all in one go, you are going to have to memorize several scenes at a time and be prepared to deliver them on the day that they're scheduled to shoot. The problem is that a lot of these new actors seem to think that you can just go line by line, which is a really great way to break up the feel of a scene when you're getting into it and all of a sudden an actor has to stop everything and call for a line. It ends up giving a very stilted or discombobulated performance out of them. This will also annoy the heck out of actors who are playing against them because it also takes them out of the minute. Imagine being in this really great dramatic scene and everything's going great and all of a sudden somebody has to stop and say, what was I supposed to say again? Yeah, that'll kill a moment and a heartbeat. Now, some people might think that it's really easy to just use cue cards. No, you end up with the same thing. Instead of an actor emoting a scene, they sound like they're reading it from a cue card. They end up sounding like newscasters. So, if your character happens to be a newscaster who's doing a nightly news bulletin, then sure, use all the cue cards you want. But if you want the actors to be very natural sounding, skip the cue cards. Sex and nude scenes. These are the scenes that either involve the act of sex or leading up to sex, or scenes that involve disrobement to some degree. When it comes to these types of scenes, there's no real overall feeling about them. Some actors love them, some actors hate them, some directors love them, and some directors avoid them like the plague. But sometimes the story does call for them. It can take up an awful lot of time because there's a lot of factors to consider here. First and foremost is the comfort degree of your actors who are going to be portraying this scene. Most of them are going to request a closed set, which means only the people who absolutely have to be on set are there. Everybody else is out. So no PAs, no crafty, no wardrobe person, no makeup person on hand. They're all outside the set and only to be called in if they're absolutely needed to come in. Usually a closed set is basically your audio person, your camera people, and your director, along with the actors. This usually happens whenever there is any type of full frontal going on. Now, if actors aren't comfortable with each other, which is often the case if they've just met that day, it's going to take a lot longer for them to get into the groove for the shoot. Suggestion to prevent this is to have the actors meet well ahead of time. Even go out to lunch with them, let them get to know each other. It'll make things a lot more comfortable for them when they actually have to do this really deep and intimate scene later on. You might end up with an actor who is getting a little pervy, and I know that sounds horrible, but it does happen. You're going to have to play referee on that one and make sure that the actors understand that this is the way this plays out, this is how it makes it look like they're getting all hot and heavy without actually getting hot and heavy. If for any reason an actor is not at all comfortable with someone, scrap the scene. I'm saying this right now because if you're trying to get an actor who is not comfortable with their opposite, it's going to read on screen, and it's going to be a really, really awkward sex scene. Now, even if the actors are getting along great and the crew's comfortable and everybody's happy about everything, it can still take forever to do a sex scene. It's not uncommon for these things to take several takes. A lot of it has to do with figuring out camera angles, especially when you're trying to hide some naughty bits. It could be with lighting. Bedrooms are all kinds of fun to light, especially if you're going with romantic lighting. And the overall awkwardness of acting through a scene like this can result in some unexpected and unscripted giggling, laughter, whoopsies, whatever. So whenever you're going to be shooting any type of nude or sex scenes, schedule in at least an extra hour. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Unconnected Filmmaker, and if you found this information useful and want to be notified when the next video premieres, just hit that subscribe button. Or if you have anything you'd like to see an episode on, feel free to comment below. See you next time, and keep those cameras rolling.